We are now projecting that the next president of the United States is Donald Trump.
Donald Trump won the 2024 presidential election, and for many Americans, this result feels different. Unlike 2016, Trump won this election by winning the popular vote, making considerable gains in critical Democratic counties, and ultimately winning every single swing state by a healthy margin. Trump won in counties with large Hispanic populations, areas with many black voters, and crucially won Dearborn, Michigan, which is home to one of the largest Arab American populations in the country. Welcome to Beyond the Headlines, the podcast where the news is made more accessible. I'm Brad LaPlante. Dante Chinni is a political reporter at the Wall Street Journal and the director of the American Communities Project based out of MSU's School of Journalism. The American Communities Project uses election results, economic numbers, and polling to break each community up into different types for different types of analysis, and it's a really great project. So here is Dante Chinni. Dante, I don't know if you know this, but the United States just had an election.
I heard about that. It's been in the papers. It's been in all the papers.
Yeah, been in all the papers. What was your reaction to the election, and was the outcome what you expected?
So I wouldn't say it was or wasn't what I expected. I didn't know what to expect. I mean, this is the first time in a long time I've gone to election completely unclear with what was going to happen. I mean, I talked to a bunch of people before, and I said no outcome would have surprised me. It wouldn't surprise me if Harris ended up winning by a bunch of electoral votes or Trump ended up winning by a bunch of electoral votes. I thought the popular vote would be fairly close. But, you know, there was just no way of knowing. Look, the polls predicted a margin of error election. And I know people are like, this is a landslide. This is the margin of error election. He's going to end up winning by fewer than 2 points. I mean, and the fact that all the swing states broke toward him that's what happens. I mean, honestly, in most close races, the swing states, the ones that are really close, fall the same way. That's usually the way it goes. So I wasn't super surprised. But I did not go in knowing what to expect.
And this election was a little bit different from 2016 when we saw, the outcome of the election was, Trump won, he won the Electoral College, but the popular vote went in the way of Hillary Clinton. This time it was very, like you mentioned, it was a lot more decisive for him. What do you think changed from 2016 to now?
Well, I mean, look, everybody's going to have their theories, as everybody does after an election, about what really happened, in quotes. But I'll tell you right now, like, looking at the data, it really feels like it was the economy. I think most people don't understand this, but Trump got 47% of the vote in 2016. He got about 48% of the vote in a little more, and didn't quite get there, but about 48% of the vote in 2020, did a little better. He's going to get a little over 50 in this election. If you look at where people were in the economy and what they thought about inflation, is that number surprising? It just isn't. No. I mean, it's about, Trump was always going to get his 47, 48%. I don't think anybody's surprised by that. Was inflation worth a couple percentage points in the popular vote? Yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely what happened. And to me, look, there'll be a lot of theories and questions about what happened, but, people are very unhappy with the economy, rightly or wrongly. They're very unhappy with the economy. And when that happens, this is the kind of election you get.
The economy, just in general, that was the number one issue for a lot of voters. But something that is fascinating and almost interesting to me is this disconnect with the policies that Trump has promised versus it just doesn't seem like Trump has put forward a campaign that would be for the average lower, income person. So what do you think that's about?
Well, look, here's the breaking news. I mean, every election says they want an election that's about policy. I need to know more about their policies. I need to know what they're going to do. That stuff was all out there. And I heard of this election many times, like, where's the substance? It's like, guys, if you want the substance, it's all over the internet. Look, Trump had kind of clearly laid out what he was going to do. Some of these things he hasn't done anything yet. He's the president-elect. But he started to name people for these positions. And look, this is kind of the things he said he was going to do. It's like, Is he really going to deport people? It's like, man, he kind of said he was going to do that. Now, you know, where that all goes, we'll see. But why is that not the economy? I think honestly, he didn't have to say anything about the economy because people were just like, the economy was better under Donald Trump than it is right now, which, by the way, is by many measurable data points, it's not true, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I think what was happening was the Biden administration and basically incumbents in general, it's happened all over the world actually, are dealing with inflation. Inflation is the most difficult issue to run against because there's really nothing you can do about it. You can't stop prices from rising. And frankly, the answers for inflation are not what people want to hear. I mean, the way you handle inflation is you have to raise interest rates and you have to cut the money supply. Basically, you have to try to basically cool the economy off. You have to have austerity, which is basically the world's worst campaign to run on. And like, frankly, we don't really need it anymore. Like, inflation's down to the target range. You usually want to keep it under 3%. It's where it is. The stock market was really going great. We're having growth, unemployment's low. These are all the hallmarks of a good economy. For some reason, people didn't see it that way. And they'd always say, like, well, I'm paying more at the grocery, and I'm paying more at the grocery store, and I'm paying more to fill up my car. And it's like, these things are without question true. But, as for, and I know people may jump down my throat when I say this, but the data don't show a lot of hardship. That's not to say that people aren't feeling hardship or they don't perceive hardship, but we're having trouble making ends meet. It's like, I understand that, but spending really hasn't died down all that much. People are still, even as people were complaining about inflation, we're spending a lot on things that were not necessary. So to me, I think it's just a memory of economy was better under Trump. I don't like what Biden did to the economy. And that's enough to swing 3-4 percentage points, and that's how you win an election.
Inflation is interesting because people are complaining about it, and Democrats' strategy was to be like, this, you aren't struggling. Like, the economy is actually doing very well, and the economy is doing very well, but that doesn't invalidate people's struggles. And if people are living paycheck to paycheck, and I think, and I'll get to Bernie Sanders' comment in a little bit. He was very scathing remarks about the Democratic Party after the election, and he's always talking about the elite class. And I think that might have been a better strategy for Democrats to almost take Republicans at their own game and say, oh no, it's not the immigrants that are why you're struggling. It's because of these ultra wealthy, these people that might have resonated with people more. Do you think that?
It's possible. When you see wrong track economic numbers like we saw on election day in the polls and the exit polls, so in the exit poll and an AP Votecast, those numbers are very, very, very difficult to overcome. I don't know what you do about them, frankly. In some ways, I don't know if Harris really had much of a chance in this campaign. Like, the numbers were just bad. And you can try to reason with people all you want, which is, I guess, to some extent what Democrats were trying to do. I don't think they did a good job with it. But that's, the proper way to handle the inflation thing was to talk about, this is much too much context for voters. You need the right person to do this kind of explaining, and they didn't have the right person to do this kind of explaining. But look, we had a pandemic. We could have had a catastrophic recession. One way we fought off a catastrophic recession is by pumping a bunch of money into the economy. Nobody complained when they got the checks. But it staved off the recession. It did what it was supposed to do. But one of the outcomes of that is you also get inflation. I mean, I often have this saying about American voters where they sometimes seem like they think they live in a light beer commercial. Where it's like, you can really have it all. And the bottom line is, you really can have it all. Like, if you're going to try to stave off a recession by flooding the economy with money, you're going to end up with inflation. That's the way it works. And I just think it's a very, very difficult thing to overcome. I don't know if there's an argument they could have made other than trying to explain why what happened. And, frankly, this is another, I don't know how well, I don't think Americans understand inflation terribly well. I think that a lot of Americans think, like, when inflation comes down, that means prices come down. That's not what's going to happen now. Like, this is where prices are. This is the new baseline. And, inflation coming down means they don't rise as fast. That's a terrible message for voters.
Right, and it is a really hard sell. Do you think there's anything that Democrats could have done to win? Anything that they could have done to overcome this steep hill?
I don't know. I mean, the only thing that could have happened is if Biden had stepped away a year ago, right? Like, or after the 2022 midterms, sometime early in 2023, and said, I'm done. And then you give the next nominee a chance to kind of separate themselves and distance themselves and introduce themselves to the public. And maybe these numbers still are very, very difficult to overcome. And eventually a Democrat's going to get tied to the Democratic president. But that might have done something. But, you know, coming in and having a new nominee with 100 days until the election is extremely difficult. And that's why, you know, Harris kind of had she just had a monumental task in front of her.
Going back to the AP Votecast data, 39% of voters ranked the economy and jobs as their number one issue, right? We've gone over this. We know this. It's been in all the papers. If you've read the news, you know this. But is it really about the economy, or is it almost a scapegoat for something that's more about culture wars?
So that's a real question. There's this question about whether it's the economy or culture. Look, Democrats have culture issues to deal with. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Like, there's a real question about where the parties are moving, what the Republican Party is becoming, what the Democratic Party is becoming, how they're kind of changing places in some ways. So that's all real. But I think even with the cultural stuff and the way Trump tried to hammer trans issues and like really pound these things in ads, especially in Michigan, actually, where that's just every ad in every football game. But in the end, those issues are the things that can help you push a voter. Look, if a voter's leaning one way, it's the thing that can push them all the way over. But like, look, all the trans ads, these things, the ads that Trump was running, like if inflation was low and interest rates were low and the economy was going great guns, do I think that stuff would it have had effects? Yeah. Would it have mattered in terms of the outcome of the election? No, probably not. I mean, look, I think American voters are fairly simple, and I do not mean that in an insulting way. I just think that, like, honestly, what they really want is they want lack of drama, they want comfort, and they want economic security. Those are the things they really want, and they didn't feel like they had that with the Biden administration. So and their memories of Trump were much fonder.
Are some people turned off by the Democratic Party when there's condescension of racism and transphobia?
Yeah, I think definitely. I do think that, like, the one thing Democrats do have to get much better about is how they speak about some things. You know, you can't just call everybody a racist, okay? You can't. And you can't just call everybody a sexist if you disagree with them. I mean, some people really are racist, and some people really are sexist, and some people are misogynists, and some people are xenophobes. These things are true. But just because somebody disagrees with you doesn't mean they are one of those things. And the finger wagging from the Democratic Party is not a plus. I mean, it's a real problem. They're gonna have to figure out how to handle it, and they haven't been very good at it.
I think there was this sense of hope and optimism among a lot of Democratic voters that January 6th and all the antics of Donald Trump would be a disqualifier among him. I'm wondering, when you were out with voters, did you ever see that, or was that not the case? Did people people were willing to overlook that?
Among some voters who would come up, obviously voters that lean left, and there'd be some Republicans, like kind of middle of the road Republicans, but like not as much. I mean, you heard a lot about the economy. I mean, people talked a lot about the economy. They talked about the price of eggs. They talked about going to the grocery store. Like, that's where people's heads were. And, you know, I do think that American voters have very short memories. I mean, it's like, you know, it did not come up at all in this campaign, maybe because news side really wanted to bring it up, but COVID. I mean, the pandemic is it's not 40 years ago, it's 4 years ago. And nobody brought it up. It's like not mentioned. It's like, and I mean, look, nobody wants to think back on it. I understand it was terrible times. We lost a lot of people, and nobody wants to think about that. But it's a pretty monumental event in the history of the nation that was just 4 years ago, and we didn't talk about it. So to me, no, they didn't bring up those things. They were really focused on basic economic concerns when I talked to them. The culture stuff would come up with Republicans, particularly people that lean far to the right. But like those people were going to be they were going to be Trump's voters anyway. Like the bottom line is, again, people think about this as this big sweeping election. It's going to end up probably about 50 to 48 when all the popular vote is tallied. That's a very close election. That's a very close election.
And so far in some of the preliminary results that we have of the election, young men specifically voted 56%, I believe was the last statistic that I read, for Donald Trump, which was kind of a big swing for people's expectations, right? Because people thought that this younger generation was going to come in and save us all, or vote more left, as they had put it. So I'm wondering, just did you do in your work? Have you spoken with younger voters, particularly men, and what do you find about this trend that's interesting?
I've seen the same data you have, which is super interesting to me. And I think as the work I do with the American Communities Project goes forward next year, I think the gender divide is something we're particularly interested in, particularly among younger voters, college towns like East Lansing, like Ingham County, and talking to people about that. So I see the same things you do in the data. Even with those numbers, though, are they permanent? Probably not. Like, this is one election. We got to see. They might be. I mean, they might signal a larger trend. But again, like a lot of this, it's easier to make the arguments about weak leadership and chaos and the need to get control over things and the need for a strong man when people feel things are out of control. And I think for young men in particular, the idea of putting a guy in charge and doing manly things and fixing the economy, which isn't really broken, that was appealing. That was appealing to a lot of men. Like what this means going forward, like the gender divide among younger people. I'm kind of curious to see the way it plays out. It's absolutely fascinating election. What it means going forward, we're gonna need some time to find out what it means. I don't think it's a last word on anything. It's a point in the data set. We'll see what the next point in the data set looks like a year or 2 years from now.
Now that Republicans have this coalition, they've built this Trump coalition, I'm wondering if there's any chance that Republicans might move left on any of these issues to enhance. So, because some of these issues that people are voting for, like abortion rights or better access to healthcare, do you think there's any chance that Republicans compromise on some of these issues now that they have a coalition now to widen it?
Well, I think abortion is a really tricky issue for them because, yes, like even in Florida, like, the abortion measure didn't pass in Florida, but it's only because they set the mark at 60 votes. It got 57. Trump won the state, and the abortion measure that was very lenient, that would make abortion a right in Florida, got 57% of the vote. That's pretty remarkable, and that shows you a little bit of what this coalition is, such as it is. Like coalitions are around for elections. Whether or not they're durable takes time to see. I think that moving liberal on abortion, I don't know. I think they are going. I think the Republican Party and like there are parts. Look, there are still parts of the Republican Party that are strongly anti-abortion, and they're going to have to come to terms with the fact that that's not where the country is. It just isn't. I mean, poll after poll shows this, that people don't want the government involved in these questions. They want the government out of these questions. So they're going to have to come to terms with that, and we'll see. The stuff on healthcare or the other issues are more interesting to me. Like what happens if the Republican Party really is going to be the party of like working class America? Working class America needs help from government. I know they don't want to hear that, but they do. I grew up outside Detroit. I grew up in Macomb County. Those jobs went away. And, yes, some went to foreign countries and some went to automation. These things are all true. But like they're probably not coming back. I know nobody wants to hear that, but like they're probably not going to come back. At least if they do come back, they're not going to go back in the same way. That time in history is gone. So these are people that are going to need some help. And I don't just mean like living on the dole, so to speak. I mean, it's just like helping people try to get out of where they are and move on to something else in life. That's going to be interesting to see the Republicans handle that, because this is a very different population that are, making up the base of the party now.
Going back to Bernie Sanders and his remarks, he made some scathing remarks saying that it should come as no surprise that the Democratic Party, which has abandoned working class people, would find that the working class has abandoned them. Some pretty heavy, pretty heavy stuff to say, right? What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting idea. The one thing I will say is, what are the policies that Trump put forward to help these working class voters? I mean, to your point earlier, it's just like, sure. I mean, I guess that's true. I mean, the Republican Party is the party of working class voters right now. But I'm not sure what policies the Trump administration is offering other than like make America great again, or I'm going to bring back manufacturing jobs. Like, I mean, they'll bring some back. Some will come back. But like this idea that like, look, the president, people don't want to hear this. The president ultimately has fairly limited control over the economy, other than the ability to ruin it. The president can ruin an economy. But it's not like a president can alter, global economics and make it possible to have like tons of manufacturing jobs in the United States be like the right call for companies. That's about something much bigger than the president. So I do think that Bernie Sanders is right about one thing. Democratic Party has stopped talking to working class voters, and that's something they're going to have to work on fixing, because they need some of these voters, and like more importantly, like the country needs working class voters. Like we need these people to be involved in the economy. We need their children to be involved in the economy. But I'm just saying that like talking to those voters is the first step Democrats should be doing, and they haven't been doing. But like the policies are trickier. I'm not sure to help working class voters. The policies are much trickier. You can offer them, small business loans. You can offer them the opportunity, like scholarships for their kids to go to college. But frankly, with some of these people, they're not interested in having their kids go to college, which is, again, I don't think terribly helpful to them. Look, the idea of, again, I grew up in Warren. The idea of that your father was at the factory, you go to high school, then you graduate high school and you go down to the plant and get the job. That hasn't existed for, that reality hasn't existed for 40, 50 years. Maybe 40 years. That means we have to kind of reimagine how to help people in the way the economy is transforming. The idea that we're going to turn the economy back to be something that it used to be, and we're going to make the economy what it was in like the 1970s or 80s, just like that's just not how economics work. That's how the reality works. Like the world changes, and we've got to figure out how to help working class people in the new economy have meaningful jobs and careers and lives. And like that's work. And that's something that Democrats should be at least talking about. I just don't know if the answers are super simple. And again, I'm not sure what the Trump administration or the new Trump administration is going to be proposing to help those people, because the answer, and that's not a knock on them, it's just it's a very hard riddle.
What do you think is next for the Democratic Party, and how are they going to go into the 2026 midterms kind of flat-footed?
I mean, it's really, really, really early. Like we're still, we're not even 2 weeks past this election. So what the landscape is going to look like in 2026 is just, it's very, very difficult to know. I think that Democrats, if they're smart, have to do some of the things we talked about. They have to try to talk to people, working class voters, have to talk to rural voters, have to go talk to people in some of these places. But what the situation is going to be for them is unknown. Generally speaking, first-term midterms are bad for the party in power. Republicans are going to control the House, the Senate, and the presidency, so that could be a challenge for them. But this isn't really, is this a first-term midterm? Because is this Trump's first term? Like, where are we really with that? How do people feel about what he's done? I mean, like, look, we really don't know what Donald Trump's going to do yet. But he's talked about a lot of things. Could he do things that, like, again, this coalition he's built, how's the coalition last if he starts doing some things? This idea that, like, he's going to dissolve the Department of Education. I don't think most Americans voted for him to dissolve the Department of Education. That's not what was behind the vote. What was behind the vote is, like, bring back the good economic times and just, like, I want inflation to go down. I want my life to be easier. But, like, the idea of, like, and we're going to get rid of the Department of Education. We're going to deport all these people. Like, look, we've already looked at the deportation question because it was in the VoteCast data. 55% of Americans think that illegal immigrants that are here, or undocumented immigrants that are here, should have the opportunity to become legal immigrants. 55 to 44. That's an 11-point gap. That's pretty big. And even with the work we do at the American Communities Project, some of the places that voted for Trump, like some are very much for deportation. These places we call the aging farmlands, evangelical hubs, working class country. These places all very much behind deportation. But other places that voted for Trump, places around military bases, Hispanic centers, even ex-urban places which are a little wealthier. Exurbs are evenly divided on the question. So are the blue-collar kind of suburbs. This is not a slam dunk question. So some of what the Democrats are going to be dealing with in 2026 depends on what the Trump administration does in 2025 and 2026. And that's an unknown right now.
That was Dante Chinni of the Wall Street Journal and the American Communities Project. You can find Dante's work at WSJ.com or at AmericanCommunities.org. My name is Brad LaPlante. I'll see you next week.